There you go, Mom. Have a seat. We are in Eagle Butte, South Dakota. The lake/Missouri River is beautiful. We crossed over the Missouri. You could see all of the grass flowing because it was just, as far as the eye could see, just tracts and tracts of land of fallow fields. It just looked like an ocean. No crops, nothing. It was just natural growth. What it probably looks like, I think, if it's just left alone without agriculture. We needed a break. We're exhausted. I don't know. I think we did a couple 100 miles since we last filled up. I'm probably gonna fill up here too. The wind is brutal. More than anything, it's the wind. It's just so flat and high pressure, and I'm looking forward not to being in the Great Plains anymore, so it's not windy. It's like a constant battle against the wind. I remember I was leaning, God, it felt like 45 degrees in one angle. So I'm gonna go fill up.
We're now halfway across South Dakota and the landscape changes on the other side of the Missouri River. It's no longer flat, it's become more hilly. Every mile we go, by average, is a little bit higher in altitude. Unfortunately, it's late in the day, so it's extremely hot. Out of my entire journey to the Pacific and back, I remember this ride being the toughest. The land here is known to be the land of the Lakota Native American tribes. Sitting Bull is one of the most famous. Sitting Bull was born in 1831 in what is today Montana. Sitting Bull earned his name after riding forth and counting coup against a tribe of neighboring Crow Native Americans. The Crow were another Siouan tribe that were the enemies of the Lakota. Counting coup refers to the rite of passage and prestige for a witness act of bravery against an enemy. The act of counting coup is touching the enemy with a hand or weapon and escaping unharmed. Escaping unharmed is seen as more honorable than escaping wounded in the attempt. Those that have their coup counted are given an eagle feather to wear in their hair. If wounded, their feather will be painted red. Having your coup counted is a part of a series of 4 rites of passage to becoming a war chief. Joe Medicine Crow was the last surviving Plains Indian war chief. In World War II, he completed all 4 of these tasks. Touching an enemy without killing him, he decided not to kill a young German soldier. Medicine Crow had his hands around his throat choking him, and he decided to let him go after the German yelled, "Mama." He took an enemy's weapon, he took the German's weapon upon releasing him, he led a successful war party, Medicine Crow led a successful attack on a Nazi camp in France, and stealing an enemy's horse. He rode off with 50 Nazi horses after his attack on the camp. He died recently in 2016 after getting his Medal of Freedom from President Obama back in 2009. After earning his own rite of passage at the age of 14, a young Lakota by the name of Jumping Badger would be renamed to Buffalo Who Sits Down, which was abbreviated to Sitting Bull. At 35 years old, he was leading Dakota forces against the United States in Red Cloud's War in Montana. For 3 years, he led guerrilla attacks against U.S. forts throughout the upper Missouri River region. After the war had reached a peaceful conclusion, Sitting Bull refused to acknowledge the treaty that created the Great Sioux Reservation. He said, "I wish all to know that I do not propose to sell any part of my country." The next 10 years of Sitting Bull's life are a bit of a mystery. The only accounts we have are oral historical sources. Because of the depletion of the buffalo herds, many Native Americans would rely on U.S. government agencies. Sitting Bull and his bands would live off the land and were not registered as entering these agencies often. It was hard for the U.S. to know the whereabouts of one of the most important Lakota leaders if he lived off the land and off the grid. During this time, Sitting Bull's enemy was the Northern Pacific Railway. The railway was a northern railroad route that was to connect Minnesota and the rest of the U.S. with the western states along the Pacific. Sitting Bull and the Lakota attacked a surveying party that was scouting locations for the railroad. The next year, the company returned with U.S. federal troops and Sitting Bull attacked again. Once again, the survey was interrupted. After a third attempt, the Panic of 1873 pushed the railroad into bankruptcy, and this finally halted the construction in Lakota territory. At this time in 1873, as stated in episode 3 of the season, Custer illegally led U.S. troops into the Great Sioux Reservation in search of gold in the Black Hills. This led to the Great Sioux War. A staunchly religious man, Sitting Bull had a vision. He said that he saw many soldiers as thick as grasshoppers falling upside down in the Lakota camp. His people took Sitting Bull's account as a prophetic vision that the Lakota would have a great victory. Word spread. Native American tribes had united under Sitting Bull. This was particularly rare as tribal unity wasn't common among Plains tribes at this level. The Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, and Cheyenne tribes were united in preventing U.S. encroachment on the land that was agreed on by the Treaty of Fort Laramie. Because of this unity, Custer was unaware of how large the force would be when he led an attack on the Lakota camp in the Little Bighorn River. Custer's 7th Cavalry of 700 was pitted against the 2,000 warriors of the tribes under Sitting Bull. U.S. forces under Custer were forced to retreat, but Sitting Bull pursued and annihilated them. Public shock and outrage at Custer's defeat in the Great Sioux War led thousands to enlist and march into the Dakotas. This led to the defeat of the tribes. Sitting Bull was forced into exile and escaped to the Northwest Territories of Canada, where he lived for 4 years, refusing a pardon and a chance to return.